Right. We had guests in this week.
Yes. We have Valdemar from Phalanx in with us to talk about Race to Moscow, so their new game.
Now, people will know Phalanx from
U-Boat.
U-Boat.
Or U-Boot.
U-Boot. An incredible game.
Yes.
I think we have a Let's Play of it as well. If we can make sure we link that Let's Play into the show notes, guys. Because it's a really intensive game.
Yeah, well, it's really intensive. It's really good, but this new one is really good as well. So it's focusing on Operation Barbarossa. So myself and Jerry get to sit down and actually have a chat about the concepts behind this game. So we'll take a second. We'll be right back.
Hello, everybody. I am joined by Valdemar from Phalanx Games to have a chat about the latest game that they are bringing to everybody, Race to Moscow. I'm also joined by the magnificent Jerry, and we're going to have a little bit of a look at this game. So, Valdemar.
Hello, yeah.
Hello, welcome to the show.
Welcome. It was a pleasure to come here again.
Mm-hmm. So, what is this game?
Well, this game is a logistic challenge to try to get all the armies to Moscow before the winter comes.
Yeah, so if we have a look at the map here, the gaming board, we can see we have the three different army groups that were invading Russia during World War II.
Yeah, it was the largest campaign fought so far in the world history.
And each player, so it starts off, you can play 1 player, 2 player, 3 player, or a 4th player who's sort of a half step into it.
Yeah, it's called a half player, just to intrigue anyone, because this is the player responsible for playing the Soviets, which is a different gameplay.
Now, some of the key features, we've played this game off camera, and one of the key features I love about it is the resource management that you guys have built into it, because it's not just, you have a certain number of resources every turn. You actually have to manage the logistics of moving the resources from the back of your lines to the front, which I find really intriguing.
Yeah, this is a logistic game because fighting is easy. You just have to spend munitions or fuel as the card says you, because the enemy units are on the cards, they are not on the board. But the real challenge is that when you run out of anything, then you have to build a line of communications and trying to bring everything as smoothly and as efficient as you can.
And one of the other key things is that I noticed during the game is, so if we look at the green tokens on here, these also count as a bit of a timer for you, because if there's none of these to place on the board, the Soviets are completely dug in and they are just perfectly set to repel the Germans.
Yeah, this is the why the history is repeated again and again, because the standard course of the game means that you cannot conquer Moscow.
Yeah.
This is what happened in our game, It was just one area too far, and this is kind of an adventure game, because every time you are advancing, you have to pick some army to see your encounter is. If it's not covered with these green markers, it can be something good.
Yeah.
But green markers, it can be bad or worse.
Or super bad.
Super bad. Yes, we have there, not so bad card, but the other card, if you can show, is the first marker.
Yeah, I'll give these to Jerry. I think we have a camera set up for that.
14th Mech Core, which will eat up a fairly substantial chunk of your resources there. So fuel and 2 munitions, although you will get an Iron Cross out of that one, as is only right and proper. However, if you run into the first Mechanized Core, that's all your ammunition and fuel to deal with those. So
this is super bad. Yeah, this is super bad.
Yep, and each of your forces can only carry a certain amount of material.
6, yeah. So definitely, after, even if you win such a combat, you are completely exhausted, and your rear forces, your trucks, your trains, you need to take the supply from your main base, if there is any.
Yeah, well, it's the other thing as well, because every round we're getting 2 actions, and basically your options are you can keep fighting until you're out of gas, but then you need to take the time to actually husband it along, because all of your resources start from this side of the board over here, and then you need to start laying out your train tracks to bring it via train, which is pretty efficient, or using these lovely little trucks.
Well, I think the first thing is everybody, unless you're playing the 3.5 version, everybody's playing an army group, a German army group. So you are competing, shall we say, for
Who's the best general?
Who's the best general? Who wants to get the field marshal's baton in their knapsack? Who is going to reach the goal of Moscow for the fatherland? But because of that, when you're doing things in the game, when you're pulling additional transportation, so you can pull in extra trains to help funnel your resources to the front. You can pull in resources from it's a communal pool. So as people spend them, they go into the pool, and then as they're resupplied, they come from here. So if there's not much fuel in there, and it comes to my turn, and I take all of the fuel, that stops your Panzer Army or your Panzer Army. So, and just like the actual German military, there was the constant fighting between the various sections of trying to get the resources they need and make the case to the overall, to OKH, so the overall commander. We need these at Army Group North, we need these at Army Group Centre. Getting those resources quicker will help you get forward, but will almost undoubtedly stymie the other two fronts. And it's a really interesting interplay then, because even though the end goal is the same, it is a competitive game where it's not that once one person has taken Moscow, you've won, they've won, and the other two players have lost. They are the losers. You are the worst generals.
It's not cooperative game.
No, it's not. It's very, very competitive, and finding those points where you can log jam on the map. So there are train tracks, not literal train tracks for the trains, but there are train tracks for your armies. So North can only move into the areas that are either blue or blue-white. So, for example,
so they're designated operations area.
Yeah. So,
yes, exactly.
And the fact that I moved in there would therefore impede the units coming in behind from Army Group North, even though Army Group Centre. So the eyes on the prize is key in this game. It is that tactical decision of, can I keep my own units supplied? But at the same time, if somebody starts racing ahead of you from another army group, then you can find yourself hemmed in and have to backtrack to actually progress. And that's burning resources as well. If my panzer divisions have to turn around and go back the way they came before they can go forward on another route, that's petrol I couldn't afford to use.
Yes, you have limited sources of petrol.
Yeah, and then on top of that, it's not just everybody heading for Moscow. You've actually got, each one of them has their own sort of win location. So we've got Leningrad in the north, Moscow in the middle, and Rostov here in the south.
Yeah, but Moscow is available for everyone.
Yeah.
The north can also head for Moscow, just as I did. Yeah. And the south can choose also between Rostov and Moscow. Only the center can only focus on Moscow. Yeah, but if another player also wants to go Moscow, then it's a race. Yeah, it's a race.
Yeah, and then you actually get that interlinked support from the people who are maybe going to Moscow with you, because our units do work together even if it is competitive. So we do have to worry about how far we're extending our lines, and are we going to get cut off from our main group and actually knocked back again.
Well, this is the benefit, because we all know, just playing south and north, that the white, the center, has to go to Moscow, because anyway, it's the only objective. So we can just try to stick to him and try to, let's say, I secure your flanks, but you also secure mine. Because there is also the mechanism of counterattacks. So you cannot be sure that your markers are on the board forever. If you are not protecting this with your armies, then it will be destroyed.
And that's the other lovely balance, is just how far ahead can you push with your forces, because whenever the game is initially laid out, there is just a massed line of Russian forces in front of you that you have to break through, clear out to actually set up your game timer, and then they all start appearing from the back edge of the board, slowly moving forward, and then you don't have that engagement. As you're moving up to meet them, you're losing time as they have time to embed themselves.
Exactly. And this is the way it works, because each time you are not making a progress, each time it was definitely our last turn, yes, or the turn before.
Yeah.
Because you always have to count how many markers are there, how many turns are there, because you can plan a nice reshuffle of supplies, but it will turn out that the very last action will be not available because the game will end sooner than this.
The thing that intrigues me about the game itself is, even though everybody is competing against the other German generals, they're also competing against the game mechanics. So they're competing against Russia as a whole, and each army group has an opposing AI general, for want of a better word. So, for example, there's Fyodor
Kuznetsov, yes.
But these cards are all doubled. So on this side, it shows you what happens if you actually have to fight him. So at the end of your turn for Army Group North, he would start by counterattacking if possible. If not, he'll protect an objective city. And if he can't do that, then the Victory City protection near Leningrad will kick in. However, each of these cards is double-sided with a more imposing general on the back, and they have better abilities. And likewise, I think for myself, against middle, I had Pavlov, but the alternative, if I was playing as a more experienced player, would be Zhukov, and I really didn't want to ever see Zhukov out there. But even though it's a multiplayer game, you can tailor the opponent to the actual player's ability. So if they're only playing for the first time, if you're a group of 3 players playing for the first time, you can have this easier, and they're not easier, but theoretically simpler fighters against you. If one person is more ground into the game and they know what they're doing, then they can flip over to that experience side and have a better tactical
they
game.
can play hard mode.
Yeah. And the fact
because,
that you can flip back and forth, so 2 people could be on hard and 1 person could be on easy,
exactly,
or all 3 of you.
Yes.
So you can really tailor the game to your players, which I just think is amazing.
Great idea.
And of course, even if you are playing solitaire, because then you can also choose the easy side or the hardest side.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and after you've been playing for a long time, you're maybe very comfortable fighting in the north, but the other 2 you're not so good on. So you could maybe level up the difficulty in the north and keep the other 2 a little easier for you as you learn some of the tricks and tactics for moving through that landscape.
And to learn the map, because you also need to know which cities are important and why they are important, and what connections are efficient and which are not. Yeah, because, they generally, we have the locomotive on the box. Yeah, because the most important thing in this game is how will you plan your rail network.
Yeah.
As we can see, Jerry planned it's straightforward to Moscow. Yeah. So he was advancing in one direction.
Yeah,
and Justin was building.
I was kind of, don't worry, we're going down along the south of the port here. I kind of want to take Odessa, and then I'm just gonna have my trucks just drive forward with everybody else. It's fine.
Yeah, and the thing about that is, the most efficient way is to move via the railroad. But like you can see here, there's a massive train of trains bringing the supplies forward. But this, even though it was the most efficient way, wasn't the best tactically for me, because once you've got that route blocked by trains or blocked by trucks, then they stay there until the game resets.
These are traffic markers, actually.
Yeah, they're impediments to further progress. So even though late in the game I had supplies, I had Panzer Army right at the door.
You just captured Vyazma, as they did historically.
The fact that these 2 trains were sitting in the middle meant I could bring stuff forward here, but then I would have had to transship it onto trucks to bring it round that impediment, which all of a sudden stopped me dead. So I couldn't get the supplies forward to get to the army group to progress into Moscow. So efficiency works to a certain extent, but you have to plan and look for those speed bumps that are going to hit you. And the middle army group center is really restricted in where they can go. They have a very direct route to Moscow, but it's a very narrow route, and you can find yourself blocked in very quickly by it, which is just fascinating.
Well, it's narrow because you let me capture Veliki Luki and Vilnius before, because and you were advancing before me, because it's the group which has 2 armored armies.
Yeah.
So it's up to you whether you want to go to the wider or more narrow.
Yeah.
Then you also have
front
on the borders between the north and south those dual colored locations that can really crush army groups center into the center even more if they're not careful, and then just really just stymie the transport routes that they have.
Here's the thing.
But as on the other hand, the Army Group South has, let's say, half of the board for their disposal.
I did find playing this. I did find it was really slow just to make sure take and hold the ground, grind forward.
Yeah, because you are using the World War One tactics.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a very wide front.
Yeah,
Yes,
just keep the line. No, it's not how the Blitzkrieg works. You just take your panzer, go straight forward, and let the infantry do the job.
So here's a question. The three army groups are similar, but different. So Army Group South is mostly infantry with one panzer army.
Yeah, exactly.
Center is 2 panzer, 2 infantry, and you have a fleet, 2 infantry,
yes,
and a panzer.
everyone has, let's say, 4 units.
Yeah.
But they are different, because, well, it's historical.
Yeah.
It's nothing. So, and each of the groups, because let's say that you have not one game, you have 3 games, because each of the player
wants to play in a different area.
It's completely different experience. So you can play the game shifting, and it's, well, I was playing North, and I was keeping my fleet in reserve.
Yeah,
so
they were in reserve for a long, long time there.
Yeah, but it was finally my decision whether do I want to prolong the game for one more turn or not. Yeah, but checking that I'm winning, it was obvious not. Yeah, but it was my asset. It wasn't automatic. The Army Group Center has the advantage of having 2 armor groups.
Yeah,
and this
the
is
armor
also
groups are a lot faster.
Yeah, they're a lot faster, but they consume much more fuel.
Yeah.
And than any other player, and just being limited to having just 2 actions per turn, and having 3, let's say, and needing always 3 activations to move all your units. This is a headache. Yeah,
it can be.
Certainly, I mean, I abandoned. A Panzer Army.
One was
they
did the job very efficiently,
did the job, and they ran out of fuel, and I just went, I can't afford to resupply them. So for the rest of the game, I progressed with 1 Panzer group and 2 infantry.
Well, during my gameplay, I found that I had my Panzer group ready and fueled and ready to rock and roll, but I didn't want to advance them because I couldn't get the resources to the infantry to actually keep them fed and ready just to move forward and actually support.
I mean, well, you faced with the difficulties of the Eastern Front. It's just a few hundred kilometers, because let's say one connection is about 100 kilometers, so you don't have enough troops to secure the front.
The entirety of it,
So there are always the gaps. So it was, well, the trick is that you cannot cover everything. You have to focus.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a very, very interesting game. Now, important question. How are you guys bringing this game to market?
It's we are doing the Kickstarter campaign, which will start on 18th of November.
Okay, awesome. And so I assume this is the core set we're playing with. Are there many expansions that we're going to be looking for during it?
Actually, what we want to do as a stretch goals, I mean, this is the prototype which says already including the stretch goals, because what we want to start with is, let's say, the minimum which is necessary. I mean, and then we'll be unlocking, let's say, the new shapes of the tanks. Yeah, because basically what you need is just the 2. I mean, just the Panzer 38 and Panzer 2, but Panzer 3 and Panzer 4, there are extra forms, so they'll be upgraded as well as the air support units.
Oh yeah, Jerry, show some of the aircraft, because they are lovely models.
And they will be just a separate expansion available for the backers, because for the retail edition there will be cardboard.
I see. So basically, whenever people are just jumping into this on the bare bones, they get everything they need to play in the box.
Yes,
but all of your stretch goals are those sort of quality of life upgrades that you can give to people.
Yes, this is our strategy for, let's say, all our Kickstarter campaigns, so that there is not much difference between the retail version, the Kickstarter version, but what we want to do for our Kickstarter lovely backers is to give them some extra stuff for free, and let's say it will be available for retail, but for the extra cost. And I would pay any money for just nice planes myself.
Well, and it's nice that when you're picking up the copy of the game, it's already it's the fully playable game. You're not having to rely on a stretch goal to make the game play to its entirety.
Yeah.
But having the additional options there, so having the little trains themselves are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain Lloyd will want to,
Yeah,
to lay his
I'm
hands
surprised he hasn't dive bombed into the studio already.
on. Oh, I've sent him pictures, don't worry. But yeah, so the fact that you can play this and you can play it, you know, it's a counter-based game essentially, but having things like the fuel tanks and having the ammo dumps and having the planes and the various styles of armor available is just a really neat little touch. Another neat touch that I noticed when we were playing was when you attack an area, if there is an opposing army, you'll take from the Race to Moscow pile, and if there's not, if it's an empty area, you take from one of your own piles, and these are all set for the specific army group, center, north, or south, and these are all original World War II photographs.
Yes.
So
most of them colorized by us.
yeah, which I just absolutely love to bits, because there's so many different ways you could have done this, and they could have been just
That's
text.
a great picture of Churchill.
Yeah, he's not carrying the Tommy gun, but he can have everything. He doesn't always carry one.
Yeah, it was the one picture because the card says that he declares war.
Yeah.
So this is the war way, the Churchill.
Definitely.
And these, I think, for a sad man like myself, these original photographs, and they're not the same. I mean, there's certain cards that are replicated throughout decks, but the images themselves are fairly different throughout each of the decks, and it just gives this really interesting historic perspective on what was going on. Because sometimes you had something and it will just be Japan has declared war or Japan has invaded wherever it happens to be.
Because we wanted to cover all, let's say, that there are the news coming to the troops. Okay, for example, as Justin, it was advancing, and at the moment Ark Royal was sunk. So our Kriegsmarine is also fighting, or maybe our let's say allies, Japanese, are entering into China, or maybe the allies have signed the Atlantic Charter.
Yeah. In fact, there's the Ark Royal one. It's a beautiful shot.
Yeah.
You mean the torpedo shot?
Both, I think, is the answer to that one.
Yes, let's go with both.
But that just is a lovely touch. Are things like this set? So are the card decks themselves going to be set for the game, or would there be a possibility of expanding beyond those when you actually hit Kickstarter, or is it just going to be one self-contained system?
We're not trying to expand the cards. What will be make available options is, let's say, this available of the fourth player, because it requires some changes in the components, the minor ones, but still, because what we want to make the funding goal is the real funding goal. What's the minimum amount that we actually need
to actually get this in people's hands
to get the game, and then we will be just making the benefit for, let's say, everyone. Then we can pop it up.
If you reach that.
Yeah, although I tell you what, I would, and I always do this, I always look at games and go, how far could this go? I would love to see this game.
But Moscow is the answer. That's how far we could go.
Actually, no, what I'm thinking is this game has the potential to spawn, successors where it's the race to Berlin. So you start in Normandy and it's you battling your way through France into Germany, trying to get there before the Russians get in. Things like that. I would love to see this system applied to that.
Well, the first game in the system was Race to the Rhine. So we're starting in Paris and trying to get to the West Wall, but now people are just thinking, just maybe we should try to
change the front.
Well, it's changing the front. We have a conversation with our Russian partner, and he told, for the, let's say, obvious reasons, they are not interested in publishing this game in Russia, but they are waiting for the sequel, and they are changing direction. They want us to make Race to Warsaw. So we're changing the way, but the obvious expansion for this game, but let's say we want to bring this game after Kickstarter as soon as possible, and we don't want to make the campaign with tons of expansions that will we are going to be fulfilling for the next 5 years. we believe that if people like it, then adding the expansion, like for example Rise to Stalingrad, with, let's say, it will be about 2 players. Yeah, it's just another set of the board. Yes, Stalingrad is somewhere there. Or whatever else. Yes, a nice idea. Just then you can play just, let's say, Race to Warsaw and Race to the Rhine simultaneously, and with the group of players seeing who will be
well, I mean,
the winner. But
with your map design, it's very easy that your next expansion would just link on to this one, and you could have someone playing Russians working their way in from Russia, someone playing the British and Americans pushing their way in from Normandy. Oops, if I don't send everything flying on the table.
It's doable. I mean, just
could be very cool. I'm excited.
The system is very smooth, very working, and there are also some, let's say, in design options, let's say, for the North Africa.
Oh, that could be good.
Yeah, so just for 2 players, I have to figure out how to make it fog of war. Yeah, because they were bouncing between let's say Tobruk and Alexandria, and they were going one way to another, and the supply was always the key there, because once the party was closer to the supply base, it was very fierce fighting, and the other party was having the line extended up to the maximum, so it was going one and second direction. And actually the another game, a little bit more difficult for the design, but it will be the Race to Tokyo, the Pacific War, when it's no trains, the ships, and all this happens because just the changer is that try to focus on logistics. I mean, just the tactics. Well, there are so many games about tactics. You don't want to make another one.
Yeah.
Here's an interesting question then, because we've only sort of briefly skirted around it. Generally, you're being attacked by an AI playing the Russians. So whatever you do is a set of priorities, counterattacking. But you said there's a 3.5 version. So how would that work, or how does that change things?
Because then the decision of where to place the next Soviet marker is by the player. Then you just make the 2 separate decks of cards. One is for the infantry units, and the other is for the mech units.
Yeah. So the Race to Moscow cards, these ones.
Yeah, these cards. Yeah. So and then we will have to make just the change for the counters because
so some are infantry, some are vehicle.
Yeah, it's because it will require making them double-sided, and then even from the setup, the Soviet player decides which areas will be defended by the tanks. I mean, just the very bad and extremely bad units, and which areas do you want to defend with your infantry. So then you are trying to outguess what will be the objectives of the Axis players.
Yeah, what route are they going to go for?
Yes, but just these markers cannot be moved. So if you put it in the wrong place, and unless somebody envelopes you, they are stuck. So you might be the one that you are putting your tanks in the wrong direction, and somebody, because for now it's kind of random, but you can recon, you can use your air support. But at this moment, there is a trick where to put my defense. And then such events like partisans also is not decision of players, it's decision of the Soviet player where to blow up the
so
train network.
Train networks and that sort of thing.
Where is your most required supply needing to be coming through? That could be good.
So it's very interesting that the Soviet player.
Well, you can also play with the Soviet player one-on-one, but it's not that fun as playing 3 versus 1.
3 versus 1, or even if the Soviet player is teaching a new group how to play, so they're there to answer questions, but they've already set up and they know what they're going to be.
Yeah, this is what I was doing when I was teaching, let's say, some members of our staff this game. So also testing this variant. Okay, so I'm the most experienced guy, as designer, for this game. So
I hope so.
I will play the Soviets. Yeah, it was quite fun. Yeah, because they can only advance to the half of the board.
Yeah, so it's definitely if the Soviet player isn't as taxing initially as once the deployment's done, their work is about 80% done, and then afterwards it's just where the reinforcements go into.
Yeah.
That's why we call it half of
Yeah,
player.
that's it, yeah.
Because it's, let's say, half of an engagement, because you don't have to care about
Yeah,
all
you
the
don't have to worry
logistic
about
stuff.
that. Yeah. Yeah, you can just sit back and watch the German forces bounce off.
Yes, and you are very happy if they
Yeah.
are moving their supplies up and down, and okay, let's place. Okay.
Oh, whoops, you went into Kursk. Guess what? There's KV1.
Yeah, exactly.
God, I hope not.
I also have to say it's a very, very quick game to learn. It didn't take us very long to actually just be picking it up, running with it, and then between you and me, Jerry, we were just running away, making our own tactical decisions without any help from yourself, which I quite like.
Yeah, this is the goal, just to create the games which can be easy to learn and hard to master.
That's always the key, really. And whenever you've got people sitting there going, at what point do I just leave somebody sitting behind, is always a good thing, because the logistics isn't so much how I'm going to defeat my opponent. It's, can I keep defeating my opponent, or do I run out of steam? Do I get so overextended that I leave myself open to counterattacks, or just high and dry, just no fuel in the tank, no bullets in the gun,
and especially no food, because
and no food.
Yeah, because when there is a reset, that's why you have the halt markers here. Yeah, because these units were not supplied with cookies.
No rations.
Yeah.
No schnitzel.
Sadly lacking in the cookies.
So they have to go to the country and feed themselves, so they are not operational.
I mean, like, I think one of the biggest mistakes I made during the gameplay was down here at Pripyat. Is it?
Piatra, yes.
Piatra, yeah. So this acts as a smaller supply depot than my main supply depot.
Exactly.
So I was only getting half the amount of supplies every time I was taking supplies out of here, but it's so much closer to this southern tip that it was just too tempting to pass up.
Well, these are the choices the players have to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
it sounds like this is going to be a really, really exciting one for everybody at home. Anything else you'd like to tell everybody?
I have my fingers crossed, because just this design is 5-year-old. It was developed, tested, and also tried to put it as, let's say, the concept of the board is. One thing we haven't told yet. I mean, just the weather zones. Yeah. There are not direct rules regarding these weather zones, but they fit the game. Yeah. Because we start with this nice summer.
Yep. Start our campaign here.
Then we will go to this autumn, fall. Then we'll go into the mud section. And then entering mud section is actually 3 areas away, so everybody who is there is quite close to win. And finally, there is the winter section.
Yeah.
And it's really hard.
That's where General Winter stops all the armies.
Yes, so you're fragile. So also it's also the key for learning the map. Yes, because if you should know that if you are entering the mud or the winter section, you'd better be prepared.
Yeah. Well, it's one thing I'll say. I would love to visit Russia, not in the winter.
Unless you are prepared and well equipped.
It's me. I'm never going to be prepared for Russia in the winter. Not going to happen, folks. All right, well, if that's everything, everybody, I tell you what, make sure and keep an eye out for this one on Kickstarter. It is a fabulous, fabulous game. Definitely one to give a go. We will move on. Get your comments down below. Tell us what you think of this part of the war and what you think of the idea of playing a logistical war game on the tabletop. We'll move on. We'll see you shortly.
Nice. Eastern Front, then.
Yeah, I love the idea of this game, that it's less about the actual combat and fighting and more about the resourcing of your forces to keep them up to speed.
I like it, the logistics, because if you can't keep your logistics up, that's you're done.
Yeah, you can't. You can be delayed in a combat, but you can't lose. You're not losing an army at any stage. So you never have to worry about overextending and your army being destroyed.
Yeah.
What you have to worry about is overextending and then that army just sitting there forever.
Unsupplied.
And once they get unsupplied, they stop moving. And that's it.
And we train.
Trains, so many trains. I may have sent a load of pictures of the trains.
It's interesting, because it's something I've been thinking about in war games recently, in tabletop war games. And so I'm going to throw this out there as a discussion point for the community, okay? And if you disagree with me, I'm just going to shout you down. But I had been thinking about war games recently, and I had thought about. I was watching some dude on YouTube talking about war and about strategic, tactical, and operational.
Yeah.
Jeez, there isn't very many of them on YouTube, is there?
No, there's not. But this was one anyway. And I had thought about war games from that perspective. You know, in most war games, you'll see strategic. Now, I tend to think of strategic as being what you do in your meta and what you do in your deployment phase. And then tactical is as you play it all out, because like no plan survives first contact with the enemy. But I don't often see the operational side, and the operational side is the logistics and the like. So, it's been something I've been toying with even myself recently. I've been trying to formulate in my own mind. I've got this great big massive black sketch pad, like an A3 hardback sketch pad, because everybody knows if you spend money on getting something big, beautiful, and hardback, your ideas will be exponentially better.
See, I imagine that we would just go out to Studio One of these days, Warren, and just, you know, the way you see some of the conspiracy theorists, stuff all over the walls, red yarn from point to point to point.
Dude, if you could get past all the tin foil, you will.
Well, surely you just wrap that on the roof.
But I've been thinking about this from game design perspective. You know, it's of how do we take a war game and actually take it into a Trinity where you would have the operational, the logistical side in there.
Ariskany, a couple of years ago now, did a whole article series on the different gaming. So we can link that down below, and that will give you a couple of pointers and some ideas as well. So.
Yeah, Jim talked about the different levels of wargaming. But what I'm wondering is, I want to keep it, let's say, do you know what? Let's keep it at 28 mil, because I think it's by far the most challenging in which to.
So you want to try and apply those kind of things to 28 mil?
I want to take the Trinity and see, right? So we know that the strategic can be applied to a 28 mil game, because that's what you do in your meta. That's what you do in your deployment.
Yeah.
That's what you do whenever you're making the decision as to what objectives you're going to try and secure.
Okay.
We know that it can do the tactical, because the tactical is your gameplay as you progress and do whatever it is you're doing. But how do we bring the operational to bear?
Count rounds.
Count rounds. Yeah. Is there anything more?
What's a count round? What do you mean by that?
I mean, you've got 5 rounds of firing in your game.
If
you fire off all 5 of those, unlucky, son, you've got no more.
Apologies. You don't mean game rounds.
No.
You mean actual count ammunition.
Yeah, you can do that for like vehicles and specialist weapons.
No, you do it for everything.
Oh, I do it vehicles and specialist weapons.
No, you have to do it for everything, or you're not having to worry about logistics. Because the minute you go, I'm not going to worry about 90% of the table, because 90% of your table will not be specialist or heavy.
He's absolutely right.
At that point, there's no logistics there at all.
Although I have seen it done in World War II games where you can get like a late war Tiger, and it's cheaper points, but it's got low fuel, so you have to roll to see when the fuel runs out.
I mean, there are things but it will come down to having to manage those things
and material,
simply because you're playing in 28 mil.
Yes,
it's easier to bring the logistics into smaller scales,
because you're
at a higher level. So, I mean, there are certain games where there are certain things you physically wouldn't be able to do. So, ancients, bar arrows,
food,
once the fighting starts,
I suppose
you're not going to have that. So, if it's not a missile weapon that you're going to lose, it's not going to affect your game.
Morale is not really a resource.
But if you're saying you have low food, that's going to affect your morale.
But why do you have low food?
Well, you would get them at, say, a cheaper points cost.
In an
ancient,
you
would take a morale hit.
Are we talking about ancient battles? Because the battle's over in a few hours.
Yeah.
I'm thinking World War II.
Yes,
is where my head's at.
We recently discussed, what was it? Was it Stamford Bridge, or where they then had a tea break in the middle of it or something when they fought all day?
And weirdly, in that they almost did run out of arrows. So the French, I'm using the word French wrong there, but the French side fired off most of their arrows first thing and were completely ineffective, and then retired because they had so few shots left, and then came back for another volley later on that caused the sort of disruption and damage. Yeah. But you have to be able to, for supplying logistics to come in, you have to work something like that into it, and you really are limited solely to ammunition. I can't think of or ammunition or fuel if you're playing a later game.
Well, let's talk about this then. So ammunition is an obvious one. Well, it's not an obvious one. Ammunition is a good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fuel.
I like the idea of having, you almost do a roll potentially at the start of the game to see what ammunition each unit potentially has. Okay, so there's a little bit of randomness to that. Fuel for sure. And what I would like would be cool to explore game mechanics where you've got this risk reward or sacrifice reward type of option where you can maybe pull in halfway through the game, like a restock potentially, if you can keep the lines open.
I mean, some things will come down to what you're playing and where you're playing it. For example, well, on the ammunition front, if you were to do something like Isandwana, which the British got ruffle stomped by the Zulus, and that happened because they couldn't maintain their firing because the lines from their ammunition to the actual firing line was very extended. So somebody literally had to go all the way back to the camp, get ammo, and then come all the way back out to the guys actually doing it and distribute it. So you have that management now in a 28mm game. You're not going to be playing all of Isandwana.
Yeah.
But if you've got 2 or 3 people who literally are supplying
Runners.
and have to go back and forward. Likewise, if you're not worried about squad consistency, if you're not going to go every squad is 10 man and they can't mingle, if you can go, right, oh my God, that side's going, I can't pull the whole unit away, but if I take 3 guys out of there and 2 guys out of there and move them over to here to join that squad that's been hammered. So now you've weakened one part of the line with manpower because that is the only other in 28mm.
So
manpower is
resource
the only other
redistribution.
thing that you could use.
Another option also is runners for passing messages and things like that. Now I know that there are some games that actually have runners in them. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that I've heard of a couple of games that have runner mechanics
there's
directly
a
in
few of
there.
the Napoleonic
You could
ones.
throw in a unit reinforcement mechanic to it, where you can reinforce, say, 10 guys in a game, just as a raw number, but it can be any 10 guys from your units. So let's say you start getting a unit that's nearly wiped and it's just your line infantry. You then have the tactical choice of, do I let that line infantry die in case some of my elite guys begin to die and I need to reinforce them?
But is this resource, I guess, men or resources? But it doesn't feel like resource management as in trying to bring stuff from the back lines.
Bringing men from the back lines?
Drops, resource drops.
Yep.
So like your drop pods or your parachuted stuff in. What movie was it, Jerry? I have a feeling it was a bridge
You've
too
watched
far.
it recently, yeah.
Yeah, so there was a movie I watched recently where I think they were low on ammo or something like that there.
Low on
and
ammo,
There was a drop and they were looking at the drop, but it was out in the middle of a field.
Was that not Band of Brothers?
No.
No, I'm pretty sure it was a bridge too far.
It's a bridge too far because of what falls out whenever they finally shoot the guy in the
That's
back.
it, because one fella plucked up the cards and said, "Oh bollocks! There'll be food in that.
We'll be dead anyway if I don't go."
And he runs and he grabs it and he grabs the canister and
I
he's
think I
running
remember
back.
what's in this.
He gets gunned down and then he falls and the canister opens and I think it's just berries.
It's filled with
Yeah.
red berries.
Filled with para berries. Yeah.
What about you, Benjamino? Considering you more than any of us are a fan of Eurocentric board games, which are about supplying moving stuff. Because I'm approaching this very much from a toy soldiers on the battlefield.
Euro Trucker, the board game.
Yeah, but is there any mechanics or game systems that you've come across
Yeah,
that
is there
would
any
lend
Euro
themselves?
things that we could bring into our war games, Ben?
Well, I think one of the things that I think we see a lot with some of the slightly more historical and deeper sort of games that are less focused around the idea of the warfare kind of things, but more around the political side, is that you have that element where you have to try and vie for resources with the other players around the table. And so there's almost like a betting mechanic going on there as well. So if you took something like that, for especially games like Churchill, for example, and did something around that, and then you mixed it in with something a little bit akin to what they do with the Song of Ice and Fire, with the kind of sideboard that you have there and that political aspect to it, you could maybe sort of feed some elements into that one as well. I think one of the key things, as you say, is trying to sort of work it around the idea of sort of the resources that you have at hand in the battle itself, because a lot of the kind of Euro games that exist in board game form focus very much on the sort of, here is a front that it's moving forward. And so I think at that level, you're starting to look at a lot of different aspects that would affect the front line of your force as a whole going forward. But when you look towards, as you say, the 28mm sort of level of gaming, where you've got sort of effectively squads of men fighting each other. That's when it comes down to sort of ammo and that kind of thing. One thing I was actually going to say is that Justin raised the point of the idea of sort of morale and that kind of aspect in gameplay, and using that as but tweaking it slightly to potentially say that the resource is something to do maybe with sort of like an element of fatigue, like kind of getting Saga. Because obviously one of the things you could do before the battle begins, and I've seen this done in some games, is that you roll to see the condition of the army when it arrives. So you do a couple of different rolls on tables before you begin. And I think I've seen it done with ancient battles and some Napoleonic stuff. And you see, like, did X skirmish go well? In which case this happens. Did this happen? Blah, blah, blah. So when the forces come to the table, you can throw that extra little bit of a resource into there of having that maybe these units are slightly more fatigued than the others because they had to fight that front vanguard attack against the enemy when they ambushed you from the forest or something. And so you then have to decide in the game, do you then use those people who potentially are fatigued and then have some of those lower resources as well? So they might have spent a lot of ammo, they might have had battered armor and that kind of thing, and you work that into the mix. So you can try to tell a little bit of a story with that rather than just being the numbers, as it were.
That's interesting because that allows you to go a little bit deeper into your scenario setup. Where if you were able to have a table or a couple of tables that you roll against each army, where it almost tells the story of the journey
to arrive there.
Because
that could be cool.
You think about it, we have seen that with King Harold's army. King Harold had to march him all the way up north, fight. It was Stamford Bridge, wasn't it? And then he had to march the whole thing. Well, part of the whole thing south then to fight at Hastings, and that's got to have taken an effect in some capacity.
Another interesting one that I came up because I was watching the recent historical drama. I think it's The King on Netflix.
What do you think of it? I haven't watched it yet.
So boring.
I think it's good. Obviously, Agincourt isn't played out exactly as it would have happened. But one of the things I wanted to bring out in that is that was a battle that was fought by the English, who were having to go at pace through France because they just landed. They need to make their way forward and do as much damage as possible before the French retaliated and attacked them back.
Does it get good towards the end then? The movie itself? Because I bailed on it about 45 to an hour into it, and I was like, this is grim. The whole thing's dark and slow moving.
I really enjoyed it. It was a little bit of a different take on it than you might have normally seen in the Shakespearean style. And because it went a little bit more into like the history side of things, but it was still a little bit more on that dramatic edge as well.
Yeah, but it wasn't the history side that it bothered me. It was just the filmatic side. It was so dull and dark.
It is very grim and horrible. But that was so. One of the things I was going to bring up is that they had those issues because that was the historical army that had to march through enemy territory and then try and fight a battle on terrain that was not favorable to them, well, to begin with anyway, until they worked out the ways to take down the French. But that was the thing where they had to consider how they're going to use their resources on the table. So these kind of ideas of drawing things and putting things together through a table to decide how things happened before you arrived can really put a lot more emphasis on the sort of the list building side of things.
Yep.
Because when you come to the game, you can't just go, I'm just going to take all the coolest stuff that I can, which is like then makes you a really small elite force, because then what if all your guys get really battered on the way to the battle, and suddenly you now got to work with a lot less men and that kind of thing, or like broken down vehicles and that kind of thing. So,
I like the concepts of managing resources when you've arrived at the battle, i.e., are your men in good condition, or are they shaken, or are they injured? Do they have ammo and stuff like this? Because you can play the same, like me and you could play games after games after games, and we don't have to build new armies or buy new units to have very different games, even though we know usually Lloyd does this strategy and usually Jerry does that strategy, but now that we've rolled on these tables, that strategy is not going to work for him. I think it's a nice way of mixing up a game.
Do you know what?
I was going to say, one of the other interesting things you could do is you could take some elements from games that already exist, like Malifaux, and obviously one of the newer games coming out, Crisis Protocol, where you have a reserve of things you bring to fight a game at the table, but you don't know how much of that you're going to use and that kind of thing, because that kind of mitigates a little bit of the, all my guys have now just got 5 fatigue or whatever. So you can kind of get around that and try and do something a little bit different with the content. So,
because here's an idea.
I always like the resource management in Infinity, for example.
Yeah.
Well, you see, here's an idea. Could we take something like, say, you remember the old Dawn of War?
Yes.
That had control points that generated you resource?
Yes.
Have those on the tabletop generate new resources each turn, and at the beginning of each turn, you will be able to buy new units to drop into a base.
Justin, do you know something, mate?
That could be fun.
I am flabbergasted by this stage of our industry in wargaming that we don't have buildings that generate.
You see, I
dreadnoughts
did see
and stuff
one
like
company
that.
brought that kind
because-
of thing to Kickstarter,
because
but it
The
slows the
game
game
doesn't
down a
last
lot.
long enough.
That's what I was going to say. The games don't last long enough. In Dawn of War, when you play it, like I've played Dawn of War games that
There's
last,
an immediacy to it.
yeah, they lasted 2 hours, and you're playing at such a rapid pace that if you wanted to replicate that on the tabletop, you'd be playing for like 10 hours to replicate the same amount of action that happens.
Jerry goes, "Oh, I like the sound of that."